As brave as this moment requires of us, we really need to handle each other with a lot of grace and care. Everyone can show up in different ways. And one of the ways that I'm really trying to seed at this time is to let our people in Minnesota know how much community love and care there is. And I do it because I have a beautiful community and a beautiful neighborhood that has stood. But I'm scared because it's been 2.5 months now and it's not over. And it's coming to every neighborhood.
Greetings. My name is Manuela Arciniegas, Executive Director of Communities for Just Schools Fund, and this is our podcast, Beyond the Bell, Organizing for Education Justice. Our podcast is committed to bringing you the voices, dreams, and brilliance of community organizers activating the public will for education justice. Together, we will learn about how to support building a world where young people, caregivers, and educators are holistically safe, thriving, and cared for, irrespective of their race, economic status, zip code, gender, and ability. Unfortunately, today's public schools and our communities are not yet safe spaces to play, learn, grow, and thrive for the majority of Black, Brown, Indigenous, trans, queer, two-spirit, disabled, or undocumented young people and their families. Yet, organizers around the country are working to build safe and supportive systems in schools. But how do we get there? CJSF's network of brilliant community organizers are building youth caregiver and educator power, ensuring that young people and their allies feel holistically safe, enjoy self-determination, and are co-governing in schools and communities. A little bit about today's episode. Today is a special Part 2 edition of our earlier episode with Twin Cities Innovation Alliance, or TCIA. Today, we hear from Marika, who has been on the ground supporting young people who have self-organized to stand up and resist ICE, demanding that ICE get off their school campuses and leave their communities. Building on the legacy of young people who have historically led racial and social justice movements in our century, Marika shares what she's seeing. She shares some of the lessons we can all adapt as we prepare in our own communities to brave against the rising attacks by our federal government. Let's take a listen. Marika, we're so grateful that you're here with us. We know you've been actively organizing and supporting your community in the midst of the deployment of massive amounts of ICE and DHS forces onto your beautiful city and state. How are you doing, and what are you seeing on the ground right now?
Thank you, Manuela. My head goes in so many different directions when you ask that question. But when I think of what we're calling the Minnesota Rebellion of 2026, what it has taught us is that many lessons, of course, but that we really need to be on our A game when it comes particularly to our digital technology, how it can serve us as is showing up in localized neighborhood networks, and how it also is being weaponized against us, and how ICE is using data and technology to entrap us. I think of my co-founder, Awesome Shabazz, talking about this in 2017 and describing what is now happening as data entrapment, where they are trying to get access to voter rolls. They're trying to get information around folks that are receiving SNAP benefits, how it comes to reproductive health. So many different ways that they are using technology and this digital time to really shift how they're navigating this moment. And what I think about this moment is that the way that we are showing up is distributed leadership. We are not looking to just one person to save us, to help us, to do that. What I have seen on the ground is door by door, neighbor by neighbor, that we have been connecting with each other to meet this moment. What really galvanized me for this moment, I've always been organized in this realm, was actually responding to my neighbor. I was looking out the window and I see a caravan of unmarked vehicles driving up the street. I was talking on the phone with my friend, and I have a complete view of my neighborhood. And I said, this looks very unusual. And I know that we have a lot of vulnerable people in our neighborhood. I need to go outside. And my friend had already just passed off a whistle to me. I hadn't gone through any training, but I knew I needed to be out in that street and show up in some way. And so I met many of my neighbors at the middle of an intersection, and they started off by lying. And like with my own eyes, I had seen what happened, and they were trying to convince us that the people that they had boxed in was someone that had like chased them and it damaged their car. And we're all looking around like, that's not what we see. We don't see any damage on the cars. Do you have a warrant? Please identify yourself. All of these kind of things to just say, we need to understand what is happening here and that these are our neighbors. We know who they are. And you have not come with any information that would lead us to believe that you are in a legal position to leave. And so we all started video recording, and we were trying to identify by name and birth date who the people were in order to support them on the other side and support their families. And as we're asking this information, we had already been advised to stay back enough of a distance that we would not interfere. And as I'm talking with one of the ICE officers, the other ICE officer turns around and sprays me and the person behind me in the face with pepper spray. And you hear the other agent, the federal agent, saying, you did not need to spray them with pepper spray, because literally it was that day that the new injunction had come down that it was enforced that they cannot use chemical irritants or pepper spray or any of those items against people that are observing or peacefully protesting. So this is like within hours, and already we know that they haven't been following the law. And so you could see the awareness in that ICE agent's face that like, this is not the scenario that we were trying to create. However, their partner was not there with them and decided to escalate this situation. They took away 6 of our neighbors. And so what happened from that moment was a hyper localized organizing on the ground. One of our neighbors, who is around 12 years old, their father was taken that night. And they had conversations with people about what was happening, and they talked about what they wanted to do. And so like we ended up writing a little note to all of our neighbors in Somali, in Hmong, in Spanish, saying, we keep us safe. Here's a whistle that we had. Another neighbor that had like a 3D printing machine printed out all these whistles, and we gave them instructions on how to alert if ICE was coming into the neighborhood. So what we did is we did what we would call a fortifying of our neighborhood, where we would introduce ourselves to each other. We checked in on like, when are the buses coming in the morning? And so we actually organized a patrol so that our young people in the neighborhood could get on and off the bus if that was what they needed, or if they needed a ride to school, or if they needed assistance getting information or resources from the schools to home. So it started out very just like simple on the block. And then we connected to a lot of the networks that I'm sure you're hearing about around the country with the rapid response, with the community hubs, and with the patrolling of communities. But while we were able to connect to this more sophisticated level of organizing, it really is just emerging block by block. And I hear so many people talking about how this is showing up. And in many instances, particularly in our most vulnerable communities, that it's our young people that are showing up to organize, ask for help, lead, and support.
Thank you for that, Marika. And so what does it look like to support this very like in real time leadership that you're seeing from young people in schools and communities? Many of us saw the footage of ICE on K through 12 campuses and what the educators were trying to do to protect young people, what the young people were doing themselves. We also saw the immense amount of leadership that young people played to organize walkouts across the country from their high schools, from their college campuses, all across the nation on January 30th. What does it look like for all of us to support young people in this time? And what are they asking for? What do they need?
Thank you for asking about how our young people are doing. In so many different conversations, our young people have said that they feel invisible. And yet they are walking in stride along us as they are addressing the same harms that are being brought upon them and their families. So I've been working directly with a number of youth organizations and youth organizers to make sure that we are connected with young people that are both organizing in schools and in outside of schools. And so that has meant we've done some political education. We've talked about what does it take for you to do a walkout or a protest to participate? What does it take to keep you safe, keep your folks safe? And then from that point on, literally young people have been showing up at their schools, developing their own teams of organizers for these walkouts. They've been researching like chants and cheers. They've gone to their bands and asked them to like marshal along with them and playing freedom songs. So everybody has really taken on this quest in a way that shows up best for them, whether it's sign making, it's music, it's leading, it's chanting, or it's finding the resources that we need to protest when it's negative wind chill 30 degrees outside. So we're really grateful to organizations like Communities for Just Schools Fund and the Advancement Project for moving rapid response funds and resources. So for the first 2 weeks, we have been able to provide hand warmers, hats, mittens, and just to make sure that a number of our folks, for the first time they were out there on the 23rd, ended up getting frostbite, and we wanted to prevent that from happening again. So a simple like supporting our young people with being able to be outside. The other thing that our young people are navigating is democracy over discipline. A number of our students have been punished for organizing and for walkouts. And so at the ground level in their schools, they're pushing it back against policies that are criminalizing them trying to save our very democracy. So there's so many different levels. We're also hearing from young people that are receiving communications from school districts and school leadership, talking about what's happening, how they're showing up. And young people are being left out of those communications, and recognizing that young people are often playing roles of leadership in their homes as well, where they're translating messages, where they're working jobs to support, and they're not being included in the communications that are going out with the school. So our young people are asking to be acknowledged for the responsible beings that they are right now and to be included in the conversations. That has been really big. But they've also been asking for healing space because they are feeling trauma in their homes. They don't feel safe. They're feeling trauma in their schools. Their friends are being taken. Their teachers, their neighbors are being taken. So how do we actually process this grief in real time when we're fighting back is a real question that young people are asking. And so they also want to know, how can they make this moment stand? They don't want to always be in rapid response and organizing. They want to build towards something. And so really it has been about imagining what that possibility could be. And so again, talking about political ed, what does organizing for the long time mean? What does it mean to connect with other young people across the country that are also pushing back right now? How are you responding to your school districts that are potentially punishing you or putting it on your record for protesting? This need to connect to other young people that are all over this place is so prescient in every conversation that I'm having. And so I am working with TCIA, and a number of us have created a group called Aunties and Vests. And so I don't know if you've seen at the protests, you have the safety marshals that are out there. And so we have positioned ourselves as the folks that are led by young people to keep them safe, but it is their lead that we're following. And so Aunties and Vests, again, are passing out all the things that we might need in this inclement weather while we're protesting, but is also there to be as backup for safety and support, to provide medic street care, any of those pieces. But what I've seen is youth workers, folks in the field of education justice have been showing up and lining up to follow the lead of young people. And we really need that to be amplified.
Thank you, Marika. And just for our audience members, putting it into context, right? 1 in 4 young people across the country are in an immigrant or mixed status household. And so that is 25% of all children in our nation right now. And the impact of this trauma in terms of increased ICE raids, the federal government orientation, the physical contact with law enforcement, whether ICE choose to label itself law enforcement or not, shows that the significant exposure it has astronomical effects in terms of PTSD, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. And we know that that impact is percolating outside of just immigrant youth and families. It's also to the young people who are citizens, because they're watching their friends being taken, disappeared. They're watching this onslaught of a military presence onto their school campuses. They're watching their own teachers be harmed, right? We also heard the impacts on the labor force, as educators have reported from the NEA in Minnesota, the compounding effects of teachers playing not just educator roles, but protector roles, and then protector roles after hours. So this is an incredible amount of stress on the young people, on the school workers, on the labor force, on the families. It's all the way around. This is why CJSF is making a stand and collaborating with Communities United to start our mental health community of practice. We're supporting young people to ask for the supports that they need to increase access and care around community and in schools for mental health. And it is part of a legacy of their call for counselors, not cops. We want care. We don't want punishment. Now, you mentioned this piece around what it takes, these additional investments in young people. A lot of the work that you and other CGSF network partners and movement builders across the country have been doing is building local infrastructure. And so help me understand how the work that you've seen organizers do, building localized community infrastructure for power, for care. Like, what are the things that you all have activated that have been really helpful in this time in Minnesota? What still needs to be built? And how should folks listening support you and other organizers to build it?
I think that's a really important question that we are still fleshing out in real time. But what we have seen is escalating levels of surveillance and a loss of privacy. And so some of the most critical infrastructures really we should have been putting in place for some time now. We have been asking for systems that could be encrypted and closed end to protect movement organizing and community organizing. I think there is a serious gap and deficit in our understanding around digital organizing. And a lot of people and information has been put at risk because we have such limited ways to respond. I'm concerned about Signal being the place to go because now they're also being targeted. They're also being infiltrated by FBI. And so how do we not think about how to just meet this moment, but how do we continue to build and sustain infrastructure that will keep our information safe, that will keep our strategies safe, that will keep our vision for the future safe as well? And so really examining how to better support those data scientists and others that are really trying to create that technological infrastructure. But then we're also talking about infrastructure across ecosystems. And I'm going to tell a story to how bring that home. And it brings us right back to Minnesota and ICE at this moment. So recently I went on a training around data centers in the South. Grateful to Media Justice for providing that in the midst of all this going on, right? And so we're touring around. So in the room, we've got environmentalists. We were the education justice people. We had folks that were like tribal law and policy folks that are all looking at the implications of data centers. And in the midst of this, one of our colleagues gets a phone call, and a group of people are actually calling from Minnesota in Minneapolis on the day that Alex Pritt was murdered. And they are stuck inside the glam doll where the incident happened outside. And so what we were trying to do in real time is a rapid response to make sure that they were safe, that interpretation was available to them so they could understand what was happening. Like, we're getting notifications in real time that they're clearing the area, that people are not allowed to go there. We were able to connect on the ground with people that could potentially pick them up and provide sanctuary. And so this time of us being in the space of organizers became less about data centers and more about what is this infrastructure that we have as organizers ourselves to support each other. The way that I have seen this field of philanthropy and others in nonprofit too is to approach this as single issue. There was no single issue that was not touched by what is happening in ICE right now in Minnesota, whether it is their data, whether it is their family, whether it is their job that has had to pivot a lot of their resources to now just show up on the ground. And so the way that we think about responding to these moments has to be about sustained infrastructure, reaction to people on the ground that are actually in the moment and are able to execute those resources and get them out immediately. But then also, how do we continue to connect these dots going forward so that we are not pushed into this corner where we're each fighting our own single issue when they're so interconnected? Like, I feel like we've been battling this. It's either basic needs or it's justice. It's basic needs or technology. It's like this either and. We can't do all of these things at once. And what we're seeing that is it's hitting reproductive health with them tracking apps and the period apps. We see it with the benefits. We see with them breaking into voting places in Georgia. Like, all of these things are connected. Our democracy is overarching, and our organizing is the muscle that is holding this together at this moment. This is not something that just happened. Like in Minnesota, we had to organize like this and build this muscle in 2020, and we didn't let it go away, even though folks were no longer interested in funding it. What you're seeing on the ground right now with these rapid response networks, these are volunteers. These are not paid staff members that are 24 hours a day, that they're doing dispatch, they're patrolling the neighborhood, they're going grocery shopping for their neighbors, they're shoveling their walks. This is a concerted effort that is organic, but to sustain also needs to see that longer term support.
Yes.
Because my concern is that we don't want to just invest in people. We want to invest in the collective. And we don't want just the loudest voices to get the resources. We want the resources to be spread out to young people, to all the folks that are doing this work. And that means being really intentional about having those relationships before these moments arrive, like CJSF, who knows that they can trust us on the ground with the work that we're doing, that we're in relationship with other people's, and the lessons that we're learning can be passed along to all of our partners in this space, because we are learning every single day how to navigate, adapt, adjust, and be agile, because they are pivoting by the moment. Like before, the ICE agents were showing up in their full gear, and now they have ICE out stamps. They've got disability labels on their car. They are dressing in plain clothes. Every time they pivot, we have to learn a new way. Like, the other thing that I think this moment is ripe for is political education and digital technological savvy, and how do we keep us safe and how we use this technology.
That's a huge one, right? Because there's only so much we might get from, and I'm so grateful, right, for Instagram and where there's like quick sound bites. Hey, disable your phone if you're going to a protest. No facial recognition. Leave it at home if you can, but memorize the contact number. Like all these really important guidelines for how to show up in these moments of mass protest, mobilization, and coming out of the uprisings. Minnesota is no stranger to the murder and the taking of Black life, like Philando Castile and many others. We have to remember the lessons we learned from then. So there's a space where movement leaders have been asking for the investment. So you have the space and the time to do that securely and strategically, because folks already saw how the state came after the executive directors and the leaders who were supporting community to show up. And we understand that folks are taking very calculated risks. Young people, when Alliance for Educational Justice was training them in mass mobilization camps this summer, it was because the organizers are anticipating what is coming and trying to prepare leaders for it. But it's a big lift, right? Not just to get your volunteers and your staff ready, but to coordinate across organizations and, to your point, across movements, and to build durable infrastructure that helps communities be able to still be nimble and move and respond and protect. We know that the powers that be are funding some of the very lawmakers who are coming out to speak out against ICE facilities. There's a group up here where I live in Chester, New York, for the Many, who has been organizing along with a lot of upstate New York grassroots organizing groups. And they help reveal, for example, how Palantir has been funding our own representative, Pat Ryan, who has been actually very vocal on the New York for All Act and all these other efforts to stop the building of an 800-bed ICE facility. Yet we understand how campaign financing works. And if they're getting 135 million, who else is giving the green light for the ramping up of the surveillance infrastructure, of the deportation and incarceration infrastructure that is clearly yielding over 22 billion, I think, in profit for some of these major corporations? So this is a chance to, like you said, fund flexibly, abundantly, no strings attached, general op, get involved, and really support movement to work beyond issue silos and to develop collective concerted strategy to fund people to be in relationship with each other and keep at it. Because this is work that was not necessarily in your work plan, even the proposal you guys sent us. We know y'all have your eye on the future. You've always been helping us land in Afro-Indigenous futures, but it's not necessarily things that you have necessarily asked for funding, or when you have, hasn't been met. We do what we can as an intermediary, moving project-based funds, GenOp funds, but we can only do what our funders will support us to do. We have to really be radically creative and release the way we've shown up to step into what this moment is calling for. I'm curious what you would say, Marika. What is your call to action for funders, for individual donors, for elected officials, for young people, for their teachers and their administrators who are maybe trying to figure out what's the right thing to do, trying to get out of their way, sometimes trying to prevent them from doing the things that democracy and justice is requiring of all of us? What's your call to action for our listeners?
So many call to actions for a very critical moment in time. One of the call to actions, I think I've highlighted this a couple times, is that we really need to amplify the voice of young people. Young people are not able to go to work, just like others are not able to go to work at this time. And so finding ways to do direct support to our young people as they are organizing is critical. We have been working on a eviction moratorium statewide to help our young people and their families stay in their homes while they're not able to go to work. So there are a number of funds that are supporting that. And also Twin Cities Innovation Alliance is in partnership with a number of schools that we are directly supporting young people for that. I think another way that resources really need to be dedicated is that it needs to be a both rapid response so that we can support what is happening on the ground to make sure our communities are safe, and at the same time, maintaining operational support and other programmatic support. So it doesn't have to be a choice between this moment and preparing for the long term. You were talking about how Twin Cities Innovation Alliance is really often about an Afro-Indigenous future. And in this moment, I think we also have had to take a moment and pause and look back and really think about like the American Indian movement. They're here in our streets right now helping support and keep us safe. I think about the Black Panthers and the Brown Panthers and how they have shown up for the communities, making sure that they have meals, that those that are not in school but are receiving schooling virtually are getting those things that they need. So there are the long-standing traditional or non-traditional organizing groups that need recognition and support because they've been working behind the scenes. But another way I will also say is, this is traumatic. This is exhausting, and it's not going away, and it's showing up everywhere else. So while you're throwing resources into Minnesota, we need to be proactive and be doing that in communities across the country. Minnesota is often seen as a flyover, so we're not naturally a magnet for resources. But at this time, it doesn't just need to be Minnesota. It needs to be everywhere all at once to really fortify this movement. The other piece is young people are asking for healing spaces, but also I've been both working with high school students, middle school, elementary, and college age students. And so they're asking for spaces to learn more about how they can use the technology and data versus having it used against them. And so one of the things that the Twin Cities Innovation Alliance and the Notice Coalition are opening up our space for is that we have the National Youth Summit on Digital Liberation. And we are going to shift that to be the National Summit on Digital Liberation and Movement. And so bringing young people together from across the country that are experiencing the use of digital technologies against them and weaponized against them as they're organizing, it is critical to bring these young people together in space so that they can commiserate, so that they can talk, and so that they can plot their future out. So creating containers and spaces for people to come together to unpack and strategize is going to be an ongoing need. We in Minnesota have been fighting for Minnesota ethnic study standards forever, and it has been passed in Minnesota. And we want to be able to tell the story of the Minnesota Rebellion through the lens of critical ethnic studies, because what is happening here is history, and the story deserves to be told through the lens of the people who experienced it. And so creating a space for storytelling and to archive what has been happening is critical, not just to us right now, but for future generations.
Right on. Because this is how we build on those lessons for long-term movement. I just want to share, I know y'all are on the ground right now. We have been praying for y'all. We've been sounding the alarm. We've been trying to continue to inspire people to show up because, like you said, this is going to continue. And so, do you have any words of advice for your colleagues, for your comrades, for other organizers around how you have cared for yourself in these times, what you need, what's giving you hope? Well, what are you hoping people are sharing with you that's giving you strength? What would you want to say to your people around, here's my advice to help protect and keep you strong and safe?
It's really hard to answer that because it takes bravery every day to step outside my house. I forgot to bring my phone the other day, and I panicked in the middle of the street because I saw cars coming. And I know I'm not the target. And so, as brave as this moment requires of us, we really need to handle each other with a lot of grace and care. Everyone can show up in different ways. And one of the ways that I'm really trying to seed at this time is to let our people in Minnesota know how much community love and care there is. And so I am working on building out a love letter to community. And so any messages of love and care that you can send to our folks, we're collecting them and we're sharing them everywhere because it's hard sometimes to get out of the house in the morning. And I do it because I have a beautiful community and a beautiful neighborhood that has stood. But I'm scared because it's been 2.5 months now and it's not over. And it's coming to every neighborhood. So walk outside your house, put your feet on the ground, breathe the air, exhale, and tell your friends and your family that you love them every single day. Mm-hmm. And we're here for you. We keep us safe.
Thank you, Marika. I will keep playing my drums for you and for TCIA. We will keep calling the healers forth to place their blessing on y'all. We'll keep doing our own personal fortification work to be ready to walk in the courage that you have so beautifully demonstrated, you and the young people all across the country. We love you. We love you. If folks want to be a part of sending those love letters, where should they send them to?
They can send them to engage@tciamn.org, and we will be publishing them as they continue to come in. And we hope it is the longest love letter that we can create.
Thank you. And so for those of you listening, please walk with our comrade and sister and beloved, Marika, Asim, TCIA, their team, the young people they've been supporting who successfully got interrupted the voluntary sharing of student data with local police, which was amplifying our young people's suspension, expulsion, criminalization. They know that this was the playbook. They've been at it for some time, stopping it. And so please support them to do that work and to train others across movements to learn how to do that and build the alternative infrastructure that keeps everybody safe. Thank you for listening. We are with you. That was Marika Pfefferkorn, co-executive director of Twin Cities Innovation Alliance, sharing her story directly from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the people have united to stand up against ICE and protect their community members. Marika reminded us of the critical role that youth play and the deep courage they're exhibiting on the ground as we speak. She reminded us what it takes to be brave and to insist that schools and communities be safe for all of us, Black, Indigenous, immigrant, dissenters, people who insist on love, safety, and care. One thing is for certain, the organizing and mass mobilizations we're seeing on the ground are bound to continue across the country. The federal government has already named their next target cities, and they are relentlessly pursuing cities to destabilize upcoming elections, among other various reasons. But Minnesota, like Chicago and LA before, have unequivocally expressed the rising tide of the people's will, a sign that we will not be moved or silenced and that we will protect our young people, our communities, and even democracy. Turning these mobilizations into durable people power does not happen on its own. It requires organizers and base-building organizations to support the emerging leadership of young people who are hitting the streets and walking out of schools as we speak. It is important to resource and care for people, the infrastructure and organizations they are building, to move all of us towards broader public change we want to see. As funders, educators, caregivers, activists, storytellers, and communicators, we must keep extending deep care for the young people and organizers who are holding so much right now and are still not being funded at the scale they need to meet the attacks facing us all. Minnesota's call for love and belonging is for all the people, and it resonates loudly in our hearts and across the country. As our elder Bell Hooks said, to begin by always thinking of love as an action rather than a feeling is one way in which anyone using the word in this manner automatically assumes accountability and responsibility. Many of us are feeling empathy and solidarity, and what will make the difference is not how we feel, but how we act. Can we show up to support the courage youth, educators, and caregivers are exhibiting right now? My invitation to all of us is that our actions be brave, unequivocal, and determined, even as we're feeling vulnerable and scared. Join a group or network in your community. Find your flock and act together. Now is the time for us to step in. Thank you to our CJSF Movement Partner Network, our donors, and our phenomenal podcast producer, Phil Circus. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate. Stay brave, family. Take action.